This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Welcome back to Mini Scandals, the series where we dive into the scandals, drama, and interesting stories that make up the world's hobbies, niches, and interests. Runescape, or Runescape if you're 10-year-old me who thinks he knows better, is the legendary MMORPG and one of the big five MMOs who, despite all odds, have stood the test of time. An innocuous third-person game with more mouse clicking than a pet store chiropractor, RuneScape's reach spans everywhere from the middle school library to the slums of Venezuela. A record-breaking 254 million RuneScape accounts have been created since its release in 2001, and almost 50 of those accounts are played by actual humans. RuneScape has probably the lowest barrier to entry for any MMO ever released. It boasts no purchase fee and graphics analogous to a papercraft nativity play put on by a school for the blind, meaning it can run on even the shoddiest laptop and even some fridges. In a system where punishment lasts as long as it takes you to think up a new email address, it's no wonder then that RuneScape has some of the wildest scandals that we've seen in this series so far. This is RuneScape's Mini Scandals. In the lead up to the 6th of the 6th, 2006, the religious population must have felt a tension in the air, the same way someone might feel flying on Friday the 13th. After all, a date marked by the number of the devil only happens once every 100 years, but for all their worries, the date was notably free of Satan's insidious grasp, unless you played RuneScape. The Falador Massacre is a legendary event within the RuneScape community, and one of the closest things many players will have to their own Joker moment, whereupon they realise just how quickly law-abiding citizens will turn on each other given the opportunity. Our story begins with fellow Kiwi player Cursed You, the first player to hit the maximum level of the new construction skill, which, in a game full of magic, wizards and dragons, allows you to live out the most unrealistic fantasy of all: home ownership. Looking to celebrate this accomplishment with his fellow players, Cursed You decided to throw a legendary house party. Given the renown of this accomplishment, as well as the extensive advertising he had done prior, the party quickly got out of hand, and while you couldn't punch holes in the wall, make out on his parents' bed, or steal the salt shakers like in a real party, the sheer number of guests made the game an unplayable, laggy mess. Well, more so than normal. Cursed You pressed the game's convenient "boy it's starting to get late" button, which promptly kicked everyone from his house. Since the player-owned housing feature was still brand new, the team had yet to iron out all of the kinks, and unfortunately this included one particularly nasty kink, the sort you'd feel embarrassed even just searching on X videos: the ability to kill other players. For those of you who are yet to Runescape, PKing, or player killing, is the game's player versus player element. When a player kills you in most parts of RuneScape, you don't die in real life, but you drop almost all of your gear, making the risk of engaging in PvP much higher than in other games. Usually this isn't an issue, as PKing is restricted to specific areas of the map that can simply be avoided if you don't like the idea of your trousers and spade being stolen by someone who hasn't used a spade or trousers in real life since the Bush administration. This concept was thrown out the window the second Cursed You pressed the proverbial flush button, ejecting their inhabitants out into the wider world. While the cause of the bug is still hotly debated, the current leading theory is that the expel button was pressed at the exact same time that several players were sent to the house's dungeon, which would have sent them to PvP mode. These players, eyes adjusting to the bright Falador daylight, quickly realised that not only could they still attack other players, they couldn't fight back. This meant all the good gear in the world wouldn't do you any good if you caught the attention of the wrong player. And amongst these wrong players, one man stood above the rest as the wrongiest of them all: Duriel321. Already wielding some of the best items in the game, Duriel321 went on a killing spree, gleefully whipping his victims to death and taking their gear as punishment for having the audacity to stand around minding their own business. During his brief spree, Duriel managed to make off with some impressive swag, including at least one of the infamous party hats, the RuneScape equivalent of looting the crown jewels from Queen Liz. Moderators could only look on in horror, telling players to bank their items and don't encourage him. Another mod Ash, a developer who just weeks before had agreed to be on call should anything fucked happen in the game after hours, received a call because something fucked had happened in the game after hours. Arriving at their Cambridge office late at night, he did what every American politician says they're going to do, and threw together a fix that would temporarily halt any further massacres. This finally put an end to Duriel's hour-long one-sided fight club, as moderators at the time were unable to ban players who were currently engaged in combat. While Jagex was able to apply a permanent solution in the following days, the players that had been griefed now demanded that the items they had unfairly lost be recovered. Some players petitioned Jagex to roll back the servers to before the massacre happened, and while this would undo the massacre, it would also undo all of the work that every other player had achieved in every other facet of the game during that time, essentially sacrificing the time of many for that of a few. Some enterprising players even attempted to message support staff, asking them to restore rare items that they hadn't actually lost. To add insult to injury, in an interview Duriel gave after the massacre, he admitted that he was willing to return the stolen items, had his account not been banned, taken the stolen items with it. Despite this supposed remorse, the Runescape community was torn over whether or not Duriel was a digital Lucifer. On one hand, this player had exploited a bug to go on a killing spree, making off with some incredibly expensive loot that might have taken players months to obtain. On the other hand, it's funny. Duriel was supposedly a 16-year-old kid, and let's be real, who among us could have resisted the urge to royally fuck over people we've never met when we were 16? I mean, that was practically the reason MMOs were invented in the first place. Over the years, the Falador Massacre turned from touchy subject to distant memory to legend. 10 years after the massacre, Jagex commemorated the bug with an in-game event that sees you invited to Cursed U's 99 Construction House Party before a random player is possessed by the ghost of Duriel 321, giving them the ability to kill any players they want. Although without them dropping their gear this time. After a while, a giant boss version of Duriel 321 would appear that players could finally get their revenge on. While the victims may have never gotten their items back, I can only hope this at least provided some much needed catharsis for those who were affected. When I research these videos, I'll often immerse myself in whatever hobby I'm looking into. I got into painting Warhammer for my Warhammer video. You don't want to know what I had to do for my Belle Delphine video. And for this video, I've become horribly addicted to old school RuneScape. Despite this thorough research, if there's anything I've learnt on YouTube, it's that there's always more you can learn from a vaguely British sounding man with more clout than you. So I sat down with MMO content creator and self-described RuneScape player Josh Strife Hayes to fill me in on this next story. Oh, hey Josh, what are you doing here?
I heard you were making a video about MMORPGs, so I got here as fast as I could.
Yeah, that was really weird. I was on a call with someone else and you just like appeared. And I actually need to go back to that other call that was like about like my taxes, but...
Josh Strife Hayes, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Now, not long ago, you told me a fantastic story that I'd love for you to tell again. It's the story of Woox and the $10,000 Deadman Invitational Tournament.
Yes, Woox is a legend in the old school RuneScape community. Woox sees RuneScape the way that Neo sees the Matrix. It's just scrolling code and systems to be exploited. It's no longer a game. It's now just a series of mechanics that Woox can prove he's better than. Amazingly, he somehow is able to do things that not even the game developers realized that you could do. They give him a mechanic and then he says, oh, it works like this, and the game devs are there going, it shouldn't, but apparently it does. He is an absolute legend, and Woox really came into his own in one of the Deadman tournaments.
Yeah, so what is a Deadman tournament?
They would start effectively a new world. People would be able to level up through this world with either slightly increased rates or locked off areas, and much like most Battle Royale style games, there would be a slowly shrinking area that players were able to exist within to keep the fight fresh, to make sure there was always players around to fight each other. And if you stayed in this kind of bad zone, you would take constant poison damage, but ultimately what it was leveling up a new character, getting as powerful as you could within a short amount of time, and then fighting to the death. And the last man standing would get a load of money. So Woox saw this, and he didn't see the mechanics they planned, he saw the mechanics he was going to use.
And what mechanics were those?
Woox decided that Deadman mode wasn't actually specifically described as PvP. It was described as survival. He had to be the last person alive, but this didn't necessarily mean he had to be the one to kill anyone. Instead of fighting, Woox decided he would just stand in the fog and tank the damage, which in MMORPG speak means he was going to try and out-heal the damage he was taking so he would survive. Now, in RuneScape, you can heal through potions, and you can heal through eating food. There aren't that many spells that you can cast on other people. You're very self-reliant in RuneScape. Now, your inventory has 28 slots, which means he would only be able to hold a maximum of 28 pieces of food, unless he used noted food. Now, in RuneScape, when you go to a bank, you can deposit all of your items or withdraw them as a note. The note simply acts as a promissory note that you can deposit at any other bank to get the items back. You can carry 28 fish on you, or you can carry a note for several thousand fish, but it's not the fish, it's promise of a fish when you go to a bank. In order to prevent this, Jagex simply turned that system off. You can't unnote food.
And Deadman tournaments.
Yeah, but they missed an NPC that could.
And of course, Woox found that one NPC out of the thousands of NPCs in the entire game.
Yes, so Woox's plan was no longer find the safe area and chill for a bit. It was find the only NPC that could unnote food, stand next to them with a large pile of gold in the poison in this little village, and just keep constantly unnoting food and then eating it in order to out-heal the damage that he was taking. So you have to just imagine that there was one valiant, blood-soaked, brave, courageous warrior standing somewhere in the world, armoured up and good to go, with this poison wall slowly closing in around him, standing there ready for a fight, looking around, seeing no one. And then on the other side of the world, in a small poisoned village, there was a man just violently eating fish. And that's what it boiled down to, because Jagex, God bless him, cannot run a tournament because RuneScape is not an esport. This is what happens when you take anything that is not originally designed as a hyper-competitive esport from the start. When you try and add in competition to it, people will look for exploits as opposed to tactics.
What was the result of the tournament?
In theory, and according to Wikipedia, it was won by a player called lololololol. Woox did not necessarily win, but he won our hearts, and he won a hashtag, which is more important than money. The hashtag Woox1 was trending for a while after this Deadman tournament finished, and I think it was a learning moment for Jagex that they cannot simply call something a survival. They have to call it a player versus player, a fight. This is what happens when interpretation of the rules in achievement of victory beyond all else is the main driving factor, instead of let's play within the spirit of the game, because there is an amount of money that will remove the spirit of the game.
So I've reviewed the footage, and what I saw happen was the fog closed in, killed lolololol,
And then Mod Ash had to command kill Woox, because otherwise he was probably going to be eating fish for who knows how long.
Yes, and believe me, if Woox wanted to survive that, command kill from a mod, he could have done. He died because he wanted to. That's what it was.
So, well, that leads to the question then. If he was the last person alive, did he get the money?
There's a tweet here saying, "Did you get the money?" And Woox replied, yes, and that was because Mod Ash himself, not Jagex, but Ash, stepped in to pay him an amount of money. So Mod Ash sent Woox a message, and he simply said, "Hi, it's Ash. Look, about your death in the fog, I really hate that we had to disqualify you for surviving, though we really would prefer to have players win a PvP tournament by doing PvP. As you reasonably feel you were entitled to the 10k prize, strictly between you and me, would you be willing to accept money off me personally? I'm not sure I could get Jagex's budget for it." So Mod Ash believed so strongly that Woox played within the mechanical limitations and proved, if anything, how versatile RuneScape can be, that he put up 10k of his own money in order to reward a player that he saw as successfully completing the challenge.
Legendary. Two legendary heroes within the RuneScape community coming together. You love to see it.
Again, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the channel.
Well, I mean, it's this or spend effort making content. And this seems like a much easier way to spend my time now.
Before we go, I actually wrote you a small song to say thanks. Josh,
As we saw in the Falador Massacre, Jagex are sometimes forced to make difficult decisions.
Do you roll back the servers to make amends to players for a mistake you made while undoing everyone else's progress in doing so? Do you attempt the impossible and ask internet users to stop drawing porn of your characters?
Now, sometimes the choice isn't such a grey area, and Jagex still manages to fuck it up.
This was most apparent during the saga of the Runelite HD mod.
For as long as games have existed, fans have been making mods. While some of these mods have questionable usage, it is astounding the amount of times that amateur programmers have significantly improved upon these games in ways that even the developer, with their big goofy sacks of cash with dollar signs on them, could not.
Even GTA 5, the second best-selling game of all time, had to have its infamously atrocious loading times fixed by a fan 8 years after it came out. Mods and MMOs go hand in gauntlet, allowing players to customize their game experience exactly how they want. Enter Runelite HD, an HD graphical overhaul for old school RuneScape. Looking to ease the eyeballs of the old school RuneScape player base, modder 117 took it upon himself to redesign RuneScape's visuals from the ground up.
After 2 years and over 2,000 hours of work, done purely for free out of passion for the game, the mod was finally set to come out. The release date of September 6th came and went, and yet the mod was nowhere to be found.
The following day, 117 made the following post to the 2007 Scape subreddit. The code had been reviewed and bugs had been fixed. It was ready to go. You would have been playing it right now. Yet, at the 11th hour, Jagex contacted me, asking me to take it down in light of the reveal that they have a similarly themed graphical improvement project that is relatively early in the exploration stages.
2,000 hours of work down the drain, all because of some vague plans that are so early in the exploration stages that nobody could have reasonably known they even existed outside of Jagex.
117 even offered a compromise, stating they could put up the mod until Jagex releases their own HD upgrade, at which point 117 would take down Runelite HD. Jagex declined outright.
EDP 117 was clearly distraught. After all, his mod broke no rules. It was simply denied release due to its vague proximity to Jagex's own HD mod that they were clearly so self-conscious about that they didn't want to give it any competition. In the message sent to 117, Jagex states,
"We think it's absolutely vital that there is consistency in the way that old school looks, and so we want to make certain that our official changes will be the only ones available."
Fans were quick to point out, what consistency? It's important to note that this decision came from someone who has the fantastic combination of being both high up enough in the company that they can make important decisions, but out of touch enough that those decisions are really bad ones. This was confirmed by both 117 and some of the mods. Not only had Jagex fucked over one of their most loyal fans, they had denied the community what could have been a great update for the game, and fans were rightfully pissed.
117's post in the 2007 Scape subreddit announcing Jagex's decision blew up to the front page of Reddit, and to this day is still the highest upvoted post ever submitted to the subreddit, somehow even managing to beat out the postmodern masterpiece Kim Jong-un lures Trump into the wildy. Outpourings of support flooded the post before users took to the streets in protest. In Falador. Nan was put in the cage, and the protesters chanted, "We could be rioting in HD," among other things. The mass protests and media scrutiny quickly caught the attention of Jagex, who put out a statement less than 24 hours later, saying they are exploring ways to allow 117's mod to act as a stand-in until their own HD update is complete.
Personally, I think players should be allowed to choose whether they use 117 or Jagex's mod, but regardless, 117 seemed very happy with this plan.
In a follow-up post to the subreddit, he announced the mod would be releasing within the coming days, and that "I will be collaborating with Jagex on the direction of the project going forward, so that it remains consistent with their vision for the game. This is not a compromise. It is something I had dreamed of while working on this project." True to their word, 117's mod released the following Monday to resounding applause from the fans. The mod looks great, the community got their way, and Jagex has almost certainly learnt nothing from this whole affair.
the South American country of Venezuela, made famous by memes with Sam Elliott in them that you find on your aunt's Facebook page sandwiched between minion memes and updates on divorce proceedings, has had its economy stimulated for years by gold. No, not the beautiful piss metal mined from God's green earth. I'm talking about the currency of RuneScape, gold pieces. You know, something that doesn't actually exist. Now look, I'm not going to get into the details of Venezuela's problems because I'm an artist, not an economist. And I can tell you now, I wouldn't bloody be here if I knew how money worked. All you need to know is that their economy has had more rise and falls than a talentless YouTuber's back catalogue, to the point that RuneScape Gold is unironically a more stable currency than the Venezuelan Bolivar, or V-Bucks. Venezuelan players earn their money through real-world trading, the concept of trading in-game items and services for real-life cash. This transaction is strictly against the game's terms of service. But let's be real, did you really think Americans would only illegally employ South American laborers in real life? For the Venezuelans, it's often a no-brainer as well. While farming flax in RuneScape can be tedious, it still beats farming flax in Venezuela for a fraction of what you would earn in RuneScape, only to be paid in a currency that could be worth significantly less when you wake up the next day. Ironically, this reliance on RuneScape's virtual currency of dubious value has actually paid out better than El Salvador's bet on Bitcoin's virtual currency of dubious value. As mentioned earlier, there are no startup costs for RuneScape, and as the majority of Venezuelans work in old school RuneScape, the game's 2007 throwback mode, it can run on practically any working computer. The concept of selling your services in OSRS is so ubiquitous there that everyone from grandma to the kids fresh out of high school know about it. And that isn't an exaggeration. Venezuelan RuneScapers primarily sell gold for real money, run gambling bots, or play other people's characters for them, allowing Jose to grind your rune crafting while you're out grinding at the club, or whatever other frivolous activity you deem more important than RuneScape, to get a feeling for just how much influence Venezuela's player base has over RuneScape. We simply need to look to March 7th, 2019, when Venezuela's president accidentally tripped over the big red power cable in his office, plunging the country into widespread blackouts. Nobody felt this more than the RuneScape community. Well, and the hospitals, but like the hospitals, over 50% of RuneScape's player base suddenly up and vanished out of nowhere. This sent the in-game markets into disarray, with the huge influx of gold and rare items that the Venezuelan players usually provide promptly drying up overnight. These blackouts have caused gold farming to fall out of favour compared to grinding people's accounts on their behalf, as gold farming runs the risk of losing it all should you die because you lose power mid-fight. Researching the story has honestly been really eye-opening. Coming from someone who's played MMOs since I was 12, it's pretty universally agreed that everybody hates gold farmers. They drive up prices in the economy, spam all the chats with their annoying ads, and in some cases, take up space in the good farming spots from actual players. It's easy to imagine the person on the other side as some sleazebag who steals people's account details and credit card numbers, because those are real things that happen. But reading the testimonies from Venezuelan players who spend all day farming green dragons just trying to get enough food to last the week, or saving up enough money to get their family out of the country somewhere safer, really showed me that what might be my mild inconvenience in a video game could be someone else's livelihood. Ultimately, gold farmers are only the visible, annoying half of the problem, symptoms of a system where lazy players would rather pay someone to play the game for them, and yet gold farmers are the only ones to catch the flack, and not the players who keep them in business. Venezuelan players are often met with aggression, and guides have even been written about how to find and kill them. In-game, I mean. While I still don't support these illegal actions that are against the game's terms of service, the next time you go to criticize someone barely scraping by in real life, perhaps you'd be better to call out the friends and guildmates who are funding these activities. Or don't, it's just a game, I don't really give a shit.
Whoa! Hey, Dot!
Hey Jimmy, ready to learn more about your personal computer? Previously, we learnt about deleting history on your computer.
And clearing autocorrect history too.
Right. Today we're going to be learning about making our own community using Squarespace.
Squarespace? You mean like a baseball field?
That's a diamond, Jimmy. And besides, Squarespace is a website that allows you to create websites.
Wow!
These days, Squarespace even lets you create and upload your own gated members-only content, send out email communications, and leverage audience insights.
What does that mean, Dot?
Do you know what a blog is, Jimmy?
No, Dot, what's that?
Wait, seriously? Use Squarespace as your own personal blogging tool to keep your fans up to date.
Wow!
Squarespace extensions let you manage inventory, promote products, streamline bookkeeping, and even display posts from your social media accounts, making your website a one-stop shop.
I like that.
Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/minikudos to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I'm going to be snapping up dogs.com. Tune in next time when we learn how to hire a hitman on the dark web.
Wow.
After another MMO scandals video, check out my video on World of Warcraft. Hey, consider checking out my podcast as well. You won't regret it. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video.